I want to first talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about why frontline digital expertise matters. How does it impact your business? Also, the obstacles to activating your frontline. What are the things you're up against in trying to create frontline staff who can promote and support your technology? And lastly, I'm going to share out a proven strategy for creating digital experts. Just tell you what's been working for us and our clients. So first thing I want to start with is why it matters. And before we sort of kick off, I wanted to ask a quick question. So I'm going to run a poll here, and I want to find out how important digital customer experience is to everyone. So I'll give people a couple of minutes to answer this. It's interesting because, a couple of years ago, or just before the pandemic, the responses came out one way, and nowadays we're seeing that it certainly seems to be a much higher priority for folks. So I'm just curious as to where everybody lands here. Okay, let me share the results here. So what you can see is that for 46% of you, it's top priority. For 53%, it's very important. So that's sort of aligns with what we're hearing these days. So thank you all for weighing in on that. I appreciate it. So let's get going. So when I was digging into this, I did a bunch of reading to understand sort of the market and where things are at. And this was something that I found that really stuck out for me. It's from a report that was written by Cornerstone Advisors in partnership with Strategy Corps. And what it shows is that mega banks are overwhelmingly winning new account openings. Regional banks are doing okay. Credit unions and community banks are lagging behind. And so I thought this was really interesting because I think it's an important indicator, a leading indicator. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are all new account openings. They could be customers switching and people having multiple accounts, but I still think it's an interesting leading indicator. And then when we look at market share, you see the large traditional banks holding strong at about 42%. But for regionals and communities, there seems to be an erosion in market share, which I think is something you'd want to pay attention to. That's pretty important these days. And this comes at a time when banking habits are changing. So this graph from Cornerstone again shows how 60% of folks are using branch less. And I think that makes sense, as the pandemic came. A lot of cases, branches were shut down, and some branches won't be reopening, and consumers' banking habits have changed. So I think that's an important indicator as well. And then when you look at banking habits and what tools people use by generation, you see that no matter the generation, people are overwhelmingly going to digital as opposed to the bank or account manager. So big changes happening in the financial industry and in how people bank, market share being won largely by large financial institutions and banking habits changing. And we can dig even deeper into that. And we see that, for informational stuff, people, if they want mortgage information or loan information, they still want to talk to a human. But when it comes transactional, transfer funds, pay bills, that kind of stuff, overwhelmingly it's digital. So I think there's a correlation there where community banks have largely relied on branch footprint and keep having people come in. As people shift to digital, they're more likely to go to the large financial institutions who they perceive to be maybe safer digitally from a security standpoint, or also a little further in their digital transformation than a lot of smaller FIs. And so the other reason that it matters is we're in the time of the great resignation. And so this financial brand thing shows, banks can barely keep up with staff shortages in the COVID world. And then Wall Street Journal, 40% of eligible workers are opting out of the workforce. And I think this is going to hit banking particularly hard. And I know that it did through the pandemic. And I'll give you an interesting story. I was talking to a regional banker, a large regional banker, about mid-pandemic. And what they had to do was, as they shut branches, they sent branch staff home and they shifted them to become contact center reps because, of course, most of their customers were banking digitally, and we saw an uptick in customer support requests. So imagine that frontline banker. So they used to work in a branch, and mostly what they did was handle transactional stuff on the internal systems of the bank. So now they're sent home. They don't have the shoulder-to-shoulder colleague support they enjoyed in branch. They don't necessarily have a tool set, but they're meant to support customers who are using products and solutions that they might not be familiar with. I'm sure you've had the experience of being tech support for your parents. They call you, they're frustrated because they can't do something. You can't see their screen. So you get frustrated. It makes for a bad customer experience. And if every day that customer experience for you, or your employee experience, because the customer experience is bad, if every day is stressful, you're eventually going to quit your job and you're going to see attrition. And so I think that's the kind of thing that can really affect the bank's business efficiency ratios and that sort of thing. So that's why I think it really matters. It's basically community banks and credit unions are at risk because big banks and of course, challenger banks and neobanks are coming in. COVID has changed how people bank. Overwhelmingly, they're banking digitally. And at the end of every digital bank transaction is a human being. So they're crucial for digital customer experience. But if we can't make sure that they have the tools and training they need, then they'll continue quitting in droves. So that's why I think it's a big deal. So now let's jump into obstacles to activating that frontline so that they become digital advocates and they're able to promote and support your digital capabilities. So I mentioned that work life has changed. So this is a stat that McKinsey came out with. 75% of FIs are letting half of their staff work from home. Now that's changing as we move out of the pandemic, but overwhelmingly staff want to continue working from home. And we've seen a couple of false starts from large banks who said you have to come back and then backpedaled when they realized that may cause a lot of attrition. So I think the move to at home, or at least partial at home, is a permanent thing. And certainly staffers want it. And I think in order to compete during the Great Resignation, we're going to have to give it to them. So for the folks who are working at home, it hasn't been entirely smooth. 74% of employees have experienced challenges working remotely. And the biggest problems they have are having the right communication tools and then the right IT tools. So those are two of the things that they really need to succeed in working remotely. So some more stuff about employees. 81% of frontline employees feel that improved training and tools will help improve service. And of course, when we're trying to retain customers and attract new ones, making sure that our service is amazing is paramount. And then 90% of staff want access to info within the flow of work. So oftentimes staff are given information in sort of an event type thing. Like if you have an in-class training or a training event, staff get information that they're expected to retain, but kind of like studying for an exam, you onboard all that stuff and then 3 days later you forget it. You need access to stuff in the flow of work to help you when you need the information. So it's another big obstacle. Also, what we hear from a lot of our FIs is that staff don't have to bank with them. So imagine if you're a staff member and you don't bank with your FI, then you're not using their digital capabilities on a regular basis. And if you're not using them on a regular basis, you're not going to have the knowledge nor the confidence you need to promote the technology to customers or support it. Last thing you want to do is if somebody comes into branch to deposit a check and say, oh, that would have been really easy using mobile remote check deposit. And then they ask you a bunch of questions you can't answer. Nobody wants to put themselves in that situation. So staff not having to bank with you is a pretty big deal. And actually, at this point, I wouldn't mind asking for what percentage that is the case. So I'm just going to throw up a quick poll here. Let me launch that. And I'll give you a couple seconds to answer because I'm curious as to in how many cases staff are required to bank with you versus not. Lots of answers coming in fast. That's good. All right, I'll end that poll and I'll share the results. So what we see here is about 64% of cases, staff don't have to bank with their employer. So the last time we ran this poll, it was 74%. So somewhere in the 60 to 70% range don't have to bank. So that's a big deal because if they don't bank with you, they're not using your tech. So that's something you got to overcome. The next thing is what we overwhelmingly hear from staff at our FIs is that their training sucks. Now, this is largely because most training that's rolled out is compliance training, and we all know how unfortunately dreadful that experience can be. It's not a great learning experience. It's also not great content, and it's stuff that is perceived largely as a chore by staff. But you can't really blame your training departments and your L&D folks and stuff, because they typically, the learning systems that they have are sort of antiquated systems of record that don't have even their own authoring tools baked in. So they have to use separate authoring tools that aren't really built for the tools for the digital age. And then they have to create content and put them into this sort of system that's in sort of nerd terms, it's based on a programming language called SCORM, which really neuters the content. So you just can't have really engaging, effective training in your old systems of record. So if you're trying to train staff on digital with an old tool, you're kind of trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. The other thing is that I talked a little bit about lacking support within the flow of work. Again, I go back to that fire drills type training. So often, you're rolling out a new product, new digital product, and there's a training event, and it's like, we're going to train everybody now on this. And once you're done, you tick the box and off you go. You're ready to hit the floor. But imagine you don't work with your you don't bank with your employer, so you don't use the tech regularly. So even if you got the training, 6 months later, you've forgotten a number of things about how to use the technology. So when you get a support request or an opportunity to promote it, you don't have the confidence to do it. And if you don't have some type of support that you can access right then and right there to solve the problem, then it's not going to be a great experience for the employee or for the customer. And then the last one is, in a lot of cases, you guys are using technology vendors for to support and empower your digital capabilities. And in what we've experienced in working with FIs is that the technology partners' main focus is rightfully on technology and building experiences for your customers. But sometimes what's not as good as it could be is the enablement piece. And so I think that's one that you can see can create sort of a little bit of a hole for you guys. And actually, I wanted to run another poll on that. I wanted to find out from you guys what your thoughts are on how effective your fintech providers are at helping you teach staff and your customers to use your tech. I'm going to give a couple minutes to answer this because I'm really curious as to what people say here. What we've seen in working with our customers is sometimes they feel that the burden's really on them to enable that frontline staff and make sure that they've got the tools and knowledge and confidence. And so I'm curious to see what everybody else feels. By the way, we're at about 60%. So I'll just give it a minute because I really want to get as much feedback as I can get on this one. Okay, I'll end it now and show you the results. Okay, so what we see here is that about 50% of you say it's mediocre, 24% say not great. So that's roughly 75% saying it's not great or mediocre, 25% saying it's good. So pretty interesting. And it kind of aligns with what we hear from our customers. So sorry, I'll just move past this screen. So now what I want to do is I want to share out a proven strategy for developing digital frontline experts who have that knowledge and confidence that they need to promote and support your technology. So the first thing that you got to do is you got to teach foundational knowledge about the technology. It's not just about driving fluency, because imagine someone comes into branch or calls a contact center and you see the opportunity to promote, let's say they wanted to pay a bill, and you see the opportunity to promote bill pay. It's not just about understanding how to walk them through the transaction. But you also got to know all the stuff like, is there a limit? Is there a fee? What are the restrictions? These are the kinds of questions you're going to field. And you need to understand them in order to have the confidence to support people and to promote the tech. And so typically what's happened is you send out, a PDF with all this information, people read it, tick a box, say they're done because they don't see it as important in that moment. So the strategy that's been effective for us is to morph that into a game. So I don't mean gamification. I don't mean read the PDF, tick a box that says you read it and earn a badge. I mean, the content itself is a game so that you learn through play. And what that does is it gives people incentive to play multiple times to improve their score. And it's through that repetition that we're able to drive a sustainable learning outcome where people retain the information and can then sort of pull that out of their brain in the moment that they need it the most when they're servicing customers. So we use game-based learning for that foundational knowledge, which is typically seen as kind of dry content. The next piece is driving fluency with the technology. So technology walkthroughs are really a great way to do this. And I'll differentiate that between sort of in-app guides. So, you've got a lot of companies like WalkMe and various others who provide guidance within the application. That's great once people have made the decision to use it. But prior to their using it, it's important that people are able to access an environment that isn't live, where there's no risk of making a mistake, so that they can see how easy it is to use the technology. And that's where technology walkthroughs really work well. We see some companies will use other solutions like video. Video is tricky because when your tech changes, it's expensive to change. And also it's not interactive. People don't get to click on the actual spots or tap on the spots where they would need to do to complete a transaction. So the interactive walkthrough is really the best way to drive a little bit of familiarity, a little bit of muscle memory, all that kind of stuff. So we've seen that to be very successful in helping frontline staff get a deep understanding of the technology. So then the next piece is we want staff to be able to promote that technology and spot opportunities to recommend it to customers. And for that, we've seen great success in using virtual role plays. So particularly when you're training folks who are a little bit younger, they're accustomed to sort of virtual worlds, grew up playing games, grew up in playing things like Minecraft that are a virtual world, and they don't really feel as comfortable doing sort of role plays with colleagues. Those always feel a little bit phony, and you feel like you might not give an exactly honest response because it's not a real situation. So we've seen that these virtual role plays where your challenge is to guide the conversation in an elegant way to the point where you can make a digital product recommendation, and then the system sort of rates you on your customer service and gives you some feedback on how well you did. Allows you to hone those skills and develop those soft skills in an environment where there's virtually no risk. And I don't know about you guys, but my kids who are early teens, like they don't even want to call for a pizza. They and I think COVID even made that worse. Younger generation prefers to do things digitally. So this has been a really great solution for honing those soft skills. So then the next piece, I'm going back to it again, providing support tools within the flow of work. So those same technology walkthroughs that you would use in training, what we try to do is give people the opportunity, put them on a hub where people can search for the right walkthrough at the right time. So you imagine a customer calls a contact center and says they're having trouble changing their password. Well, that's kind of a thing that you might not know how to do if you don't do it regularly, but it sure would be nice to search a hub and say, change password, and then have a bunch of options of different walkthroughs, whether it's online or mobile, so that you can get on the same page with that customer and you can shorten the talk time, improve the customer experience, and even more importantly, maybe de-stress the employee experience of trying to support that technology. So access to help within the flow of work, it only serves to improve the digital customer experience, but also improve the employee experience. So just to reiterate that, we teach the basics, the foundational knowledge with game-based learning, drive fluency with tech walkthroughs so people have a risk-free environment to try the technology and get fluent on it. Build soft skills with virtual role plays, and then provide support tools in the flow of work. I think that recipe is all encompassing, gives people the front end knowledge they need, the support within the flow of work, so that they can implement the stuff that they've learned without feeling stressed. So just to recap, the big benefits: if you have a digitally fluent frontline staff, you'll be able to more quickly drive organizational readiness for new technology implementation, or if you're going through an M&A and you need to bring new people on and get them up to speed in your tech. Giving the training and creating a digitally fluent frontline staff is going to improve both the employee and the customer experience. And we know that people are a crucial element at the ends of each digital transaction. And so if you can improve that digital customer experience, you can reduce both staff attrition and customer attrition, and do a better job of attracting new customers. And then on the staff attrition side, de-stressing work life, I think, is crucial, particularly in a time where we're seeing a fair amount of attrition. So I don't like to continue blabbing on. My kids have taught me that nobody really wants to listen to me for too long. So I'll wrap up with that. I'll put my email on the screen in case anybody wants any follow-up information. But I also wanted to open it up to see if we have any questions that people would like me to answer. So I'm just jumping into the Q&A now, and I see Katie says, based on our experience, do you recommend the walkthroughs that employees can search for, access, and the flow of work are also available to share with customers? Yes. So with the walkthroughs, your ideal strategy is use them in training as a step in your training course, then have them on a hub that staff can use in the flow of work, but then link them off your website so that when customers who don't want to call in, particularly the younger folks who don't want to talk to people, they can go to your website and make them readily available. Don't nest them, 6 clicks down in a flow. Make it easy for people to find them. And you can also nest them into your chatbot, so your chatbot can dispense with links to walkthroughs when relevant. We've seen customers integrate them into their interactive voice response to take calls away from the contact center and solve them with digital tools. We've also seen it used to power marketing programs. So when you send an email that says, check out our new digital capability, it's not just, here are the value propositions, it's take it for a test drive, why not? And then let them touch and feel it, which is going to increase the odds of adoption. We've also seen them used in new customer onboarding. So you got a new customer, they're going to do certain transactions digitally right from the get-go. Why not send them walkthroughs as part of their onboarding and say, look how easy it is to pay a bill. Look how easy it is to transfer funds. And that's all part of creating that amazing digital customer experience. So when they come to you, they're like, wow, this is amazing. They're showing me how to do it. It's easy. It's risk-free. So there's a lot of best practices to go around with how you would use the technology walkthroughs, but boy, you can use them a lot of different ways. Okay, next question. Does it work, or are many banks incentivizing staff to use their products? It's a good question. We haven't seen that incentivizing staff to use products, but what we do have on the platform is an incentives module, so you can reward staff for taking training and reaching and doing well at training. So the better you do at training, the more rewards you get. And so it can be, a lot of times it's like an internal contest. So if you get 90% in your course, you get 3 entries into the draw. And if you get 70% in the course, you get 2, kind of thing. So there's ways that you can incentivize staff to take the training more so than use the products, I think. Okay, another question from an anonymous attendee. We have, given that there may be several different digital tech vendors, how challenging is it to create game training with different tech? Okay, so one of the reasons we built Lemonade was that we started building some game-based training for financial institutions from the ground up, and quickly realized that it was a lot of work and difficult to scale. So we built a set of authoring tools that are technology agnostic. So it's very quick to author walkthroughs no matter what technology you're trying to promote. And on the learning side, authoring content is made very fast with authoring tools. That's one of the big advantages of our platform. But if you're using other vendors, I think the key is finding tools that allow you to quickly create the content that you can quickly that are easy to change, because your technology is going to change. Even the foundational knowledge around it is going to change. Technology is a practice, like being a pro athlete or being a lawyer or a doctor. You can't stop practicing because technology changes too quickly. So I think the criteria when you're trying to figure out, what tools to use, you want easy to create, effective and engaging, but easy to edit as well. So good question. So we have one more from Samuel here, and it says, how important, or is it important to create a repository where staff can view demos? Yeah, so I kind of already addressed this, but I mean, to me, if you're going to create the walkthroughs, not having a repository is a wasted opportunity, because standing on their own, the walkthroughs are useful to some degree, but what makes them super powerful is when frontline staff can access them again in the flow of work when they need them. And also being able to give direct new employees, like for example, new employee onboarding. Somebody comes on board, one of the things you got to get them up to speed on is your technology. You're going to train them, but you also want to give them backup for when that training's over. So yeah, I think it's really important. So I don't see any other questions, but I'm going to go into the chat to see if there's anything in there. So any suggestions to help motivate organizations to require employees to use our solutions to improve their retention and knowledge and confidence? Yeah, I mean, I think requiring employees to use to bank with you has some privacy issues that some staff might not be comfortable with. And as I alluded to, we are in the moment of the Great Resignation. And I can tell you that when you interview employees, it's no longer them just selling you. It's often like, okay, how long is this interview going to take? Because I got another 5 interviews. So I don't think I would recommend forcing people to bank with you. I think it might leave a bad taste in people's mouths in a time when, it's not as easy to attract people. So I think rather what you want to do is incentivize them to do well in training and to demonstrate that they understand your technology. I think that's the better route to go, because you're not forcing people to do things. And if your training's good and engaging and not a drag, I think you can drive just as good a result without the sort of negative feeling that you might engender with employees. Okay, I don't see any other questions. And I'm always happy to give people a few minutes back in their day, and happy to get a couple back in mine. So if you don't have any more questions, what I can tell you is I did actually remember to press the record button. And once we have had time to clean up the beginning of it, which I messed up for our team, we will send out the recording so that you have it. And if you want to share it out with folks, you can. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope it was good use of your time.